Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be discussing the Working with Policy Enforcer Learning Byte. So here in the example, I want to talk about the topology. Here, the topology on the left, we can see a few different things. We see VSRX1 and QFX1. Now, VSRX1 is acting as the firewall, NAT device, internet gateway. And then QFX1 is acting as the access switch, which connects the users, which is user 1 and server 1, to VSRX1. And notice how user 1 and server 1 use the same subnet. That is 172.29.1.101 and 172.29.1.100. They're both using the same subnet, so they're in the same layer 2 broadcast domain. And in this example, we are using Security Director and Policy Enforcer. And then the last thing I want to point out is that there is a malware server on the internet. And we're going to use that malware server to download malicious files, which will then cause some things to happen. So with that, let's jump to the criteria for the example. So VSRX1 and the Policy Enforcer needs to be enrolled with a SkyATP realm. And then after that, we need to make sure that we block malicious file downloads through HTTP. And then we need to block the users, which is in this case, user 1, from communicating through VQFX1 if they download malicious files through HTTP. So basically what's going to happen here is if user 1 downloads a malicious file through HTTP, we want user 1 to be isolated to where they can't communicate with anything on the network, not just communicate with anything on the internet, but we want user 1 to not be able to communicate with server 1. And the idea here is to stop lateral spread of malware. Because if user 1 downloads something malicious, that could spread to server 1. Because user 1 can communicate with server 1. So we want to stop that type of problem from happening. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and jump to the CLI of VSRX1 and also QFX1 to check out a few things before we jump to Security Director. All right, so here is VSRX1. I wanted to show there is no advanced anti-malware connection, so nothing's been set up there. And then if we jump to QFX1, we can show the VLANs. And we can see here that there's no firewall filters applied to any VLAN. And here in this example, we will be focusing on VLAN V99. And then there's no firewall filters configured either. So just keep that in mind. We'll see those changes later. So let's go ahead and jump to Security Director now and get this started. Okay, so here is the dashboard for Security Director. Let's go ahead and jump to Administration. And let's go to Policy Enforcer, then Settings. Now, I've already configured Security Director to communicate and work with Policy Enforcer, but I just wanted to show you that this has already been set up. And the thing to point out here is the SkyATP configuration type is set to SkyATP with SDSN. We need that parameter set like that if we're going to be using Policy Enforcer in this manner. So next we want to go to the Devices workspace. And then we need to create a new secure fabric. We'll call this LB-SF for Learning Byte Secure Fabric. Click OK. And then we need to click the Add Enforcement Points link. And what we can do here is we can add enforcement points, which in this case is going to be VSRX1 and QFX1. And then notice at the bottom left side, you see perimeter device. It's able to select which device is going to be a perimeter firewall. In this case, it's VSRX1. All right, so after adding those two enforcement points, we can expand the enforcement points section. We can see both of those devices and information about those devices. So that all looks pretty good. Next, we need to go to Configuration, or rather Configure. Then we need to go to Shared Objects, then Policy Enforcement Groups. We need to add a new policy enforcement group. We'll call this LB-PEG for Policy Enforcement Group. And then we need to select from the available subnets. And what we want to find here is we want to find a subnet or the subnet for the user devices. So that would be the user 1 and server 1 device. And that's going to be a source of QFX, and it's going to be this address or this subnet. That is the 172.29.1.254/24. Now note, if you don't see what you're looking for, or if no subnets come up, you can click the Refresh Available Subnets link to refresh those subnets. Let's go ahead and click OK. And now we need to go to the Threat Prevention workspace, go to Feed Sources, and we need to add a Security Director realm. So we need to enter a username, password, and the realm name. Then click Next. And then it's going to ask us which site we want to add to this realm. And that's going to be our LBSF site. It's going to include both of our devices. Well, actually, it's going to include the VSRX1 device and the PE device. The VQFX1 device actually doesn't get added to the realm as a device, but it still functions in the overall setup. We'll click Next, and we can just leave the global configuration at its defaults. Click Finish. Okay, so at this point, VSRX1 and the Policy Enforcer are being enrolled into the SkyTP realm. Now this takes a few minutes, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll start it back up after the enrollment is successful for VSRX1. All right, that should be enough time. Let's jump to the CLI for VSRX1 real quick and see if we are connected. Okay, so here is the CLI for VSRX1. And we are connected with SkyTP. Everything looks good there. So let's go ahead and jump back to Security Director and configure a threat prevention policy. Okay, here's Security Director. Let's go to the Threat Prevention Policies workspace and create a new threat prevention policy. We'll call this LB-TPP for Threat Prevention Policy. Then we'll include infected host profile in policy. Select that. And then include malware profile in policy. Select HTTP. And we need to select the device profile. And we can select the default device profile. That'll work fine for what we're doing. Let's change the threat score to 7. And click OK. Then, since that's been created, we need to assign it to a policy enforcement group by clicking the Assign to Groups link. And then we need to move our policy enforcement group over to the selected field. Click OK. And what happens now is it creates a firewall rule and does an analysis for you. And then it loads the analysis and we can examine the individual rules. And you can see here that the rule has a source address of LB-PEG_162.29.1.254/24. Now that address object actually includes everything in that network. So it actually includes the 172.29.1.0/24, although it's named .254/24. So keep that in mind. That's a little different, but we can scroll over and we can see that we have threat prevention policy added. We can highlight it and we can see it's LB-TPP, the threat prevention policy we created. Let's go ahead and click OK. And then let's update this. And this will push out the policy to the VSRX device. Okay, we can see that that update completed successfully, so we're good there. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go to the user1 device and download some malware. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, here is the user1 device, and the first thing I want to show is that the user1 can communicate with server1. And that's the big thing. We want to stop user1 from being able to communicate with anything else that's on the same local area network as itself. And then we need to go to the fake malware server. So here's the fake malware server. Let's go ahead and update these files so we make sure we get some new files. And let's download some malware files. And that gets blocked. That's great. That's what we want to happen. I'm going to do this a few more times just to make sure that the host gets put on the infected host feed. And one more time for good measure. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and jump back here. It'll take a few minutes for the host to get put on the infected host feed, and then for Security Director to update the VQFX1 device to block that individual host. So we'll run a ping with the server 1 device, and when that ping stops responding, then we know that the host has been isolated. So I'm going to pause the video while we wait for that, and then I'll start the video back up and we can look at a few things and discuss what has happened. All right, so you can see here that that host is now not reachable. So user 1 can't reach server 1. That's exactly what we want to see. And just for good measure, I'll show that we can't actually reach the fake malware server, or really anything on the internet for that matter. Go back here and I can attempt to ping something on the internet. And it's still unreachable. We're not getting past that access switch, which is VQFX1. Let's go ahead and jump to the CLI for VSRX1 and VQFX1 and have a look at things. So here on VSRX1, we can do the show security dynamic address command, and we can see here that the 172.29.1.101 is on the infected host feed. That's great. So let's go ahead and look at the VLANs, and we can see here for VLAN V99, that there's an input and an output filter. So we're looking at the firewall, and we can see here that there is a filter that is blocking traffic from a source MAC address, and that is the source MAC address of the user, and that traffic is being discarded and logged. And then there's an output filter that blocks it from the destination address. So we're blocking all traffic coming from that user. And something else we can see is we can look at the firewall log, and we can see exactly what's happening. We can see that traffic is being discarded, coming in on XE001. We can see the source address and the destination MAC address as well. So let's go ahead and jump back to Security Director and look at a few more things before we end this learning byte. Okay, so here is Security Director. We need to go to the Monitor workspace, and then Threat Prevention, then Sky ATP Hosts. And here we can confirm that it is on the infected host feed. We can see the threat level and things like that. And we could click on the host identifier to find out more information, but for the sake of time, we're going to continue on. And we can select the All Host Status link and look at the workspace here. We can see more information, the IP address, the MAC address, the feed name, feed source, the action of block. We can see the enforcement status was succeeded or has a status of succeeded, the switch name, which is QFX1, and the interface, which in this case is XE001. So now we have successfully completed the criteria for the learning byte. User 1 has been completely isolated and cannot communicate with anything else on the network. So that brings us to the end of this learning byte. In this learning byte, we demonstrated how to use Policy Enforcer, and then we went through some steps to verify that the host that downloaded malicious files was isolated from the rest of the network. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Networks Certification Program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.